Now the latest ITV news in the Calendar region with Ian White and Victoria Whittam.
Hello, very good evening to you. Welcome to ITV News. This is Thursday night's calendar.
Hello, thank you for joining us. And here are tonight's main stories.
Memories of a beloved animal. A family is left devastated after a fatal accident involving their horse, which they claim was caused by a dog left off its lead.
Being able to stop him, if I was still on him, I could have been able to try to turn him a different way. There's so many different scenarios. We just wish it didn't end up how it did.
Laid to rest, Yorkshire pays its respects to Lord Prescott, the Labour titan who stood up for the common man. Those who worked by his side remember an unforgettable, colourful character.
On the day, it was a nightmare because, I don't think you remember this, it was the day of the launch of the manifesto. Well, the last thing you want on the day of the manifesto is your Deputy Prime Minister starts knocking somebody's teeth out.
Where's the care for the carers? A dementia charity says the system must be made simpler for those devoting their lives to looking after their loved ones.
And changing habits, the monk who's taken to running to raise money for charity. First this evening, a West Yorkshire family in shock after a teenager was flung from a horse, which then bolted into the road and was hit by a car, suffering such serious injuries that it had to be put down.
Police are now looking for witnesses to the incident, which two sisters who were riding that day claim was made worse by a dog being allowed off its lead.
The British Horse Society said there were 280 dog-related incidents last year and 5 horses died. Emma Wilkinson reports.
And it's chucked me off just up there.
This family have always had horses, so they say they'll never get over what happened here at the weekend. Sisters Maisie and Liliana were riding with friends when they claim a dog running loose spooked their horse Loki. Lily says she was thrown to the ground before Loki ran towards a road. Maisie ran after him.
And then I just heard this big crash and I just looked and the car was totaled. There were a dent in the windscreen from where he was.
The windscreen was smashed. There were no front end of the car left. The engine were gone. It's scarred us all for life. Well, at the scene that we've seen, it was horrifying. If I'd have stayed on and the car had hit him when I was on him, I'd have been pronounced dead at the scene.
Loki's legs were broken. The girl's mum, Andrelina, says when she arrived at the scene, it was chaotic.
Maisie was just on the floor screaming, holding a horse, and obviously being a mum, I was trying to compose myself, and all I kept thinking in my head was, I can't let him try and get up again when he's got no legs. I didn't want my daughters to see anything further damaging, so I had to pin him down by his neck and hold him down.
Loki was so badly injured that when vets arrived, he was euthanised. The family say they want to track down the dog owner who they claim refused to put his spaniel on a lead when asked, and they're backing a petition for stronger legislation.
If he put his dog on a lead for 10 seconds,
look, it could have still been
here. It
here.
Could have been alive, it'd have still been here, none of this would have happened. It's not even the fact of it's just for the horse's safety, it's for the dog's safety, it's for your safety, It's for the safety of your own pet.
Last year, the British Horse Society received 280 reports of dog-related incidents. 5 horses died and 43 people were injured.
By nature, dogs are predators, horses are prey animals. So sometimes their instincts will take over by chasing or being able to flee. The owner might say, it's okay, my dog is all right with horses. Well, actually, the horse might not be okay with the dog. So just have that communication.
The girls are now nervous to ride in this area and say they're struggling to imagine life without Loki.
I'll never forget him because he was literally my baby. I don't want anyone else having to see this pain.
We won't wish it upon his worst enemy.
No.
West Yorkshire Police are continuing to investigate and have asked the dog walker to come forward, saying they believe he may be able to assist them in clarifying the circumstances of what took place here. Emma Wilkinson, ITV News.
Next tonight, people have paid their respect to the former Deputy Prime Minister and Hull MP, Lord Prescott, at his funeral in the city. 300 colleagues, family and friends were invited to his funeral service at Hull Minster. He died at the age of 86 in November, having lived with Alzheimer's towards the end of his life. He represented his constituency for 40 years. His son David read from an original speech written by his father when he was hoping to become an MP in Hull in the late 60s.
I cannot promise all the answers or not to make any mistakes, but I can assure you of a great desire to serve Hull and its people in an effective way. This may mean controversy, but surely the time to be complacent about Hull's problems is over. Comrades, I hope I can help. You did, Dad. You did.
Well, one of the Labour Party insiders who had a front row seat to the machinations of politics during the Blair years when John Prescott was Deputy Prime Minister was Keighley-born Alistair Campbell. Yes, he held high-profile roles, including Downing Street's Director of Communications. But when it came to straight talking, well, John Prescott was hard to beat. Alistair spoke to our political correspondent, Charanpreet Kera, who asked him first if any memory stuck out.
Well, it's very hard to say there's one thing that you remember about somebody who was such a big personality and such a big character and such a big part of our life. The thing I say about John, he had a massive heart. I think John's motivation in politics was genuinely to try to fight for people kind of like him, working class people, people who maybe felt that other people looked down on them. And I think then along the way, he developed certain passions. Transport was a passion, the environment was a passion, housing was a passion. And he just wanted to fix issues that he thought were broken.
The two of you had a backstage pass to New Labour when it was at its most successful. How key was John to that success?
He coined the phrase for New Labour, traditional values in a modern setting. And it was perfect in a way. It wasn't how we hadn't coined that. We worked out what New Labour was, what we're trying to do. But John that was kind of what he was. So he brought those traditional values. And he also brought to it a kind of earthiness.
There must have been difficult moments too, famously the relationship between Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Did you see John as a mediator in that relationship?
I'd say in the early days, I was the mediator quite often between Tony and John, and sometimes between Tony and Gordon and John, because John would shout, he would complain, he would argue that he was not being properly respected, not listened to. But then, once you'd had that argument and once he felt listened to, particularly by Tony, he was absolutely with you.
Of course, when people are talking about the difficult moments in John's career, we have to talk about the punch.
Yeah.
Did you think you'd be talking about it this many years later?
Did I think we'd still be talking about it? No, not necessarily, but I remember he once said to me, this was years after, and he said, you know, the worst thing about that punch, when I'm dead, that's all they'll say about me. John Prescott punched that bloke with a mullet. On the day, it was a nightmare, because, I don't know if you remember this, it was the day of the launch of the manifesto. Well, the last thing you want on the day of the manifesto is your Deputy Prime Minister starts knocking somebody's teeth out.
What was he like as a local MP?
He was very proud of Hull and his role within Hull. He loved being identified as Hull. Now, as it happens, at the funeral, I'm playing the Welsh National Anthem because he's Welsh. He was Welsh. But I think that sense of being a Northern MP meant a lot to him. Whenever Burnley played at Hull, I would always go up. And John wasn't a big football fan at all, but we went to quite a few matches together. And he would always say, come up early and I'll look, people in Hull will know better than I. But I suspect there'll be an awful lot of people who, with John now having passed away, will have stories about him as the local MP who sorted them out in different situations.
Alistair Campbell's memories there of Lord John Prescott. Now, a charity which supports people caring for loved ones with dementia says feelings of guilt are putting many off seeking the help they need. According to Dementia UK, almost a third of carers find the current health and social care support on offer hard to navigate.
It's calling for it to be made easier for unpaid carers to support those living with the condition. Sally Simpson spoke to one family in York about what it's like living with dementia.
Flicking through their wedding photos from almost 37 years ago with their son George brings back happy memories for Rob Bartlett. He hopes it might also prompt some in his wife. It's 6 years since Linda was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's when she was just 57.
I remember saying to George quite soon after that I'd worked for the best part of 30 years in the fire service, and prior to that I'd worked in the construction industry, but this is the hardest job I've done.
Rob says the support of their wider family and daily carers is invaluable, but there have been times when he didn't know where to turn, and that's when Dementia UK's Admiral nurses came in.
When she was in hospital, that was quite a traumatic time. Do you remember when you were in hospital?
No, I can't.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago now, and there was a social worker almost telling me that it wasn't safe for Linda to come home. I was really worried and spoke to an Admiral nurse who said, no, that's not right. They sort of gave me the key words that I needed to put in that conversation to get to where we wanted to be.
Research by Dementia UK found 9 in 10 carers say the transition from family member to full-time carer has impacted their own mental health. 4 in 10 admit to feelings of guilt about using or even thinking about using care services. Almost a third of dementia carers describe the current support on offer as hard to navigate.
Living with someone with dementia can be hard. You don't necessarily know what that person's going to be like from day to day, what challenges you're going to face from day to day. And I think that's why having support like Admiral nurses around that you can talk to, we need that support there for people across the UK.
It's beautiful to see the relationship that they have together and how caring he is and everything like that. But just generally the determination and the dedication, the commitment he has to my mum is absolutely amazing. And, you know, he's absolutely a hero of mine.
Sally Simpson, ITV News, York.
Still to come, the 81-year-old monk who's putting his faith in running to raise money for charity.
In other news, Yorkshire water bills will rise by 29% from April, according to figures released by the industry body Water UK. Although bills will vary depending on use, the average annual cost will rise from £480 to just over £600. The increases are higher than those recently announced by Ofwat in its new 5-year price limit because they include inflation. The Consumer Council for Water said stronger and fairer support was needed to protect struggling households.
Now, yesterday we told you about the government's backing for the reopening of Doncaster Sheffield Airport. Today, the Industry Minister was in Sheffield to support South Yorkshire's steel industry, hosting an event to attract new investment.
Well, there's also the small matter of £2.5 billion of government money, which is due to be invested into the steel sector in Yorkshire and across the UK. Well, Fraser Maud has been in Sheffield.
Yeah, well, we know all too well the troubles that the steel industry have faced in recent years, even in recent decades, and today could be a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. The Industry Minister Sarah Jones here at Sheffield Forge Masters, a roundtable discussion with steel industry leaders and leaders of industries who rely so heavily on the steel making process. Businesses like Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems, Network Rail and UK Steel all discussing the best ways to spend £2.5 billion of public money on funding the upcoming steel strategy for the government. I had a chat with her a few moments ago. This is what she said.
Well, look, if we want an industrial strategy in this country that delivers growth, we've got to have steel. Now, Sheffield Forge Masters, very successful, building incredibly powerful and secure structures for our defence, really important and doing really well, and they've got an order book that they can be very proud of. I want to learn from them, see what we can replicate and see how we can turn the industry around.
Yeah, in the last couple of days there's been a very positive result for Sheffield Forgemasters here, a £61 million contract to revive artillery barrel manufacture for use in Ukraine for the first time in a couple of decades. So good news here, but what about the rest of the industry? I'm joined now Matt Cook, Senior Organiser for the Community Union. Sheffield Forgemasters forging ahead pretty well, but not so in the rest of the industry, particularly places like Scunthorpe.
Yeah, so first and foremost, this is a fantastic opportunity for Sheffield Forgemasters. The investment is much needed and the contract is absolutely brilliant. But you're right, steel in the country as a whole, places like Scunthorpe, Old Walk and Stocksbridge are struggling and have struggled. What we need is investment. We have the skills, we have the research and development capabilities. I think the final piece of the puzzle is this Labour government who is coming to places like Forgemasters and visiting our steelworks and finding out what we need, when we need it and where the money is best spent.
Is 2.5 billion enough to rescue an industry that's coming under attack from so many sides, cheap imports being the main one?
Yeah, I do think it's a brilliant investment, and it's how we spend that money. I think that's why roundtables like today are so important. Getting in trade unions, business leaders, manufacturers, suppliers to say, what is it we're missing in this country, what do we need, and where should we put this money to the best use?
Thanks ever so much for joining us. So positive news here in Sheffield for Sheffield Forgemasters. Still concerns, of course, throughout the rest of the steel industry, but this new steel action plan that the government are discussing could well give the £2.5 billion boost that it so desperately needs to look towards what will be a bright future.
Always good to get some positive news. Fraser Maud reporting from Sheffield.
Now the ITV Evening News continues at 6:30. Here's a look at what's happening with Geraint Vincent.
Coming up at 6:30, investigators say there are no survivors after a mid-air collision in Washington between a military helicopter and a passenger jet. Chaotic scenes as more Israeli hostages are freed by Hamas. From Indiana Jones to the Marvel Universe, Harrison Ford talks to us about his new role. Join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
We will, thank you. Now, finally this evening, have you heard of the Sprinting Monk? No, it's not a pub in the Dales, although I'd probably go there if it did exist, Victoria. It's an actual monk from a monastery who's putting on the trainers to raise money for charity.
And while Father John may not be a spring chicken, he's in his 80s, he'll be keen to make a habit of exercise. Helen Steele reports.
Father John is an Anglican monk who's lived a life of poverty, chastity and obedience for 46 years. His habit and robe signify humility and commitment, but what he wears beneath represents a rather more colourful pastime. So, I guess people might be quite surprised that a monk goes running.
They're surprised that I may go walking at my age. I'm probably the only one who does sprinting.
It was a snap decision which got Father John into running.
I was beginning to feel pains in my knees and things like that. And one morning when I was wearing shorts and trainers, I decided to try and run round the church. I got about halfway and nearly collapsed.
But you carried on?
I carried on.
At this monastery in Murfield, Father John and the 13 other monks meet for services 6 times a day. But every Saturday, Father John takes 2 buses to his local park run. And how do you manage to get back from the park run in time?
I get it back into the bus station about 11 and have a bacon butty.
Oh, small pleasures then. And proving you can find strength in solitude, when the weather's bad, Father John presses on with training. As you might expect, his latest challenge, the Lee Valley Championships, is raising money for a good cause.
It's called Terero, which means hope, and it's hope for youth in Zimbabwe.
He's no stranger to sprinting.
These are gold and silver.
Having won gold at veterans races in Scotland and Ireland. But the 60, 200 and 400 metres at Lee Valley could bag him his first gold in England. I know you're doing this for charity, and
you probably shouldn't be competitive, but do you kind of want to win?
I'm inspired by that film, Chariots of Fire, where the hero in it says, I love my God and I run for him. You can't really enter into competition thinking, I want not to win, you know.
So bring him his chariot. Father John's ready to go for gold. Helen Steele, ITV News in Mirfield.
And look at him go.
It's brilliant, isn't it? You need some good weather for that kind of running. Here's Helen Plint.
Today's forecast: seafood and sugar cube towns. TUI sponsors ITV Yorkshire Weather.
Hello again, a very good evening to you. Well, I hope you managed to enjoy today's sunshine, because a bit of a gear change moving forward tonight sees a new batch of rain pushing through and thereafter leaving quite a cloudy legacy as we approach the weekend. You can see that perfect winter sunshine really from the get-go first thing this morning. So we've had full-blown clear blue skies, just a little bit of fair weather cloud out there today, and you'd be pretty unlucky to catch a shower, but they have been a couple around. Moving forward though, well, quite a sharp drop in those temperatures this evening, but it's in the second half of the night we really see that change. So cloud rolls in, outbreaks of heavy rain for a time, and actually on the highest routes where this hits that cold air, likely to fall as snow. So some slushy deposits out there as well, and really what a grey and gloomy start come first thing on Friday morning. So you can see some dampness lingering, but actually the bulk of that rain clearing quite quickly. Behind it though, stubborn clouds, some murkiness really digging in its heels, and very slow progress through the rest of the day. So yes, it stays dry thereafter, but you can see our temperatures, although similar to today, once you take off that sunshine, it really will feel like a very different sort of day to round off January. Now moving forward, we start to introduce this Atlantic flow thereafter, but where that hits the high pressure towards the east, it really slows down the progress of these frontal systems. So you can see one is heading towards us, but it really will take its time, and that means the first portion of the weekend likely to remain dry at least. Still a fair bit of cloud, but some brighter spells at times for Saturday, Sunday though. The likelihood is that rain might just affect some of us.
TUI sponsors ITV Yorkshire Weather.
Well, isn't it nice to have Victoria with us this evening? But I'm a bit worried it might be a bit past your bedtime.
Well, maybe a little. I hope you're going to be there, though, at 6 o'clock, bright and early for Good Morning Britain with me. I'll be checking you're all there. Fraser's back next at 10:30, but Garan is up next. See you later. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you. Good night.